Before we start this video, a large thank you to David, Waste Ammo, Alexander, Shanta, a name I unfortunately cannot pronounce. Thank you for the support, my friend, Gabriel, and Jonathan for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Good day, everybody. Okay, we're finally going to cover something that I talked about a bunch of times but just didn't get around to doing. So, here I have a picture of the hitboxes in Dark Souls 3. As you can see, they are limb-based, and they're just basically capsule colliders. And they rest on each individual limb. And here is my character from my project I'm working on with Rob called Nephilim. We have the same thing done. You notice the colliders are positioned from left to right rather than up to down on the spine. This is because when your character bends, you don't want the colliders sticking out of the character's body. So let's begin by adding a layer called damageable character. And I'm going to walk through this with you guys and how I set up each one. It's pretty simple. We can also erase the riposte, backstab, and projectile layers and move this layer up because I don't think any of those layers are being used right now. And if they are, it's no problem replacing them or fixing them. But I don't think they are being used, so you can remove them. So make damageable collider collide with nothing. Not a thing. So go down to damageable collider and uncheck every single check mark here. We don't want it colliding with anything. The reason is because we're not using triggers for this. We're using actual physical colliders. So in the future, when we make our updated arrow penetration logic, we're going to polish a bit more. It's going to have a more precise reaction and penetration state. So next, add a layer called damage collider and make it the only interaction with it, make the only interaction damageable character. So again, this is two layers, one damageable character, which interacts with damage collider, and damage collider, which only interacts with damageable character. Next, go to your player and save a prefab if you haven't already. We're going to do this because once you make all these colliders, you don't want to be making a set for your player every other day. So just make sure to save a prefab. I made the mistake of not prefabbing my enemy and player to the same model, so I have to do both individually. So let's start off by going to spine 1. Let's turn on gizmo so we can see the collider itself, and I'm just going to make the icon smaller so I don't see that sticking up. Going to make a capsule collider. Now, this is important. You want to make it going from left to right on the axes, not up and down. This is because when your character animates, he's bending his back, and if you have a collider going up and down, it's going to actually stick out of your character. Even though your character is hunched over, the collider will be stuck straight into the air. So make it go from left to right, play with the radius and the height, and make sure you set the layer to damageable character. That is the most important part. Do not click is trigger. Let's keep this as a physical collider. And again, you guys can play around with the size. I'm just going to show you how to do it. I'm not going to make it precise. I spent quite a bit of time doing it on my project, just getting it to feel really nice and make it the actual shape of the body. I encourage you to do the same if this is an actual project you're working on seriously. If you're just prototyping something, don't worry about it too much for now, but you want to make it as close to the size of the actual physical body as possible. Keep in mind, though, if you have very tight hitboxes on your weapon and character, if you miss with the animation, meaning if you just graze over the character, it will not register a hit. So you'd have pretty good animations to do this. If you have sloppier animations, you might want to make your weapon hitboxes a bit wider, or you can compensate by making these hitboxes a bit wider. But anyway, I digress. So back to here, let's go and put one on the shoulder too now. The important part of the shoulder is, at least in my model, is you want to make sure it ends at the forearm, okay? Otherwise, it will, again, stick out of the character during certain animations. So it should go from the shoulder blade to the middle of the forearm, and then after the shoulder comes down to the elbow. What you can do, though, is you can copy the left shoulder and paste it on the right and just change minus to positive. So basically, any collider you're making here, this is a little trick with this. Let's say you do, I'm just going to show you again, actually. We can go and do the left elbow. So watch this. Let's make a collider. And again, the elbow should go from the forearm to the hand. So let's make a capsule collider. This looks good. Let's adjust the height a little bit so it goes right to the hand. Perfect. Let's make this damageable character layer. Let's right click on the collider component, copy component, paste it on the right elbow, and now change this minus 0.12 to positive. Basically just mirror the values, and you can copy everything you do on the left side to the right side, or vice versa. And now we can do the same thing with the hand. So let's go here now and add a capsule collider on the hand. And if you find that with your model specifically, like take the hand for example, I'll just show you. Let's make this a bit smaller. Let's change the way it's resting here. We want it to go left to right, not up and down. But you can see how you can move this around a little bit as well. So if you find it's not perfectly resting on the joint, just move it up or down or left and right using the center values here, the X, Y, and Z. So put that on the Z axis. That looks, nope, it's not the right way. X axis, that looks good. So that's fine. Now we can change this to damageable character, and we can right click on the collider here, copy component, paste it on the opposite hand, so the left hand, and just invert the values on the collider again. So paste component as new, change 0.06 to negative 0.06, and there you go. It pops in the exact spot, mirroring the collider on the opposite arm. So, okay, all that's left now is the head and the legs. The head's pretty straightforward, just a normal capsule collider. Keep in mind, it's better to do this with your character if you're not wearing armor. I did it with my model in Nephilim, just with nothing equipped. So you want it to be about the same size as the character when he's naked, maybe a tiny bit bigger if you want to be more lenient. But I personally like having more precise damage colliders. Let's then do the legs. The axes here, make sure you shrink this, wrong axis X, there we go. So the legs, the top leg should come right to the knee. And again, your model might be different, but for mine, you want it to come to the knee from the hips. Otherwise, when the legs are bending, if I put it below the knee, basically when the knee bends, part of this collider will stick out. So what I'm trying to say is you don't want the colliders overlapping other joint positions, because when the joints start to bend, and if the collider doesn't end at the joint, it will stick out of the model. And you won't notice this unless you have it highlighted in the scene, because you're not going to see these colliders in the game most of the time. So it's very easy to miss. Like when I first did this, for example, I put the colliders on the spine straight up, and I noticed it when I was getting really odd damage hits. And I just clicked in Steam View and I showed the colliders. You could see that while performing certain animations, the colliders will kind of stick out of the model. So now when you're done the legs, you can do the feet too if you want. I like to do them. Personally, with this model, if you guys using the same one, I like putting them on the balls of the feet rather than the ankles. But again, just preference. As long as it covers the position of the feet, you're fine. I'm just going to invert the values here on the other leg and then do the last couple here, and we're good to go. And then we can modify the code a little and make sure this all works as intended. Also, Dark Souls 3 specifically has very good character colliders, I noticed, but some of the weapon colliders are very, very, very lenient. And by that I mean they're bigger than the weapon itself is. Specifically on a couple, I can think of the mace, for example, is a pretty wide one. I just was watching a video on a guy breaking down some of the collider sizes, and they're a bit more forgiving. Okay, so I'm just going to put this on the X axis, and that looks fine. Let's change this to damageable character. Don't forget that. Otherwise, you're going to have your colliders doing some really weird stuff in the scene, because they're going to start colliding with the ground, and it's going to make your character do some weird stuff. All right, damageable collider, and let's invert these values. This looks good. Excellent. Okay, cool. All right, that should be fine. Let's save this. Now, I'm going to save you the time, but before, actually, let's go to the weapon first. Don't forget to do this. Go to your weapon's actual damage collider and change the layer to damage collider. Also, if you guys are using box colliders with your weapon, for some reason in Unity, I find sometimes they're not that reliable. I prefer capsule colliders. For some reason, box colliders sometimes don't have, at least in my experience, really accurate on-trigger interactions. Not sure why. Now, I'm going to save you the pain of having to watch me do this with my enemy, but I'm going to do the exact same with the enemy. I'll just show you real quick if you want to. All you got to do is open up your character and just go down the line and copy all of the colliders one by one. So next, back into the damage collider, change this from if collision.tag equals character. And what we can now do is say if collider.gameobject.layer equals layer mask name to layer damageable character. And what that will do is it will just basically look for any collider containing the layer damageable character. And we can save that. Now, we haven't touched this script in a long time, and we've since refactored a few things. So let's also change this to in parent, because again, now the damageable portions are children of the main scripts. And a long time ago, we made it so you can get any script from your character manager. So we don't really need to call the stats manager or the effects manager here. We can just fetch those from the character manager itself. No need to call 3 separate variables if we can just get 2 from 1, if you know what I'm saying. It will just save us a little bit of memory. Not really a giant deal, but I like doing it. So let's say enemy manager.character stats for the enemy stats component. And then we'll say enemy manager.character effects manager for the effects component, and just copy and paste this here. So there is going to be one issue we have to deal with. Now that we have multiple colliders, I'm just going to talk over while I replace these variables, because I trust you guys can do that. While we have all these colliders now, if we were to run a weapon through them, you're going to notice that basically for every single collider we hit, we will do damage. So if I swing a straight sword and it comes across the spine 1, spine 2, and spine 3 colliders, we're going to have 3 damage step calculations, and we don't want that. So we're going to put in place a very simple system to remedy that. And all in all, this is a whole lot better now because with things like bows and crossbows and projectiles, you have an actual hitbox now that matters. Like accuracy is the thing that matters. But you can see here now, I just half of the HP of this enemy in one swing. Usually it's a quarter. And if I hit him again, he's dead. And the reason why is because we're colliding with multiple colliders, and thus it is calculating it multiple times. But this is very easy to fix. All we have to do is make a private list of type character manager. Character manager being the enemy we're striking or the character we're striking. Let's call this characters damaged. Or if you want to, you can say, to be more precise, characters damaged during this calculation. Just so it's very clear what this does. So when we're basically opening this damage collider, we want to make this list, we want it to be new, or at least empty. So the first thing we're going to do is, if the enemy manager is not null, we're going to say if characters damaged during this calculation contains our enemy or our target, return. We don't want to damage them. That means they've already been damaged by this attack or this thing that's happening. We don't want to damage them any further. If they haven't, we're going to add them immediately after. Character damage during this calculation, add this enemy. Make sure that's after we check. Otherwise, you'll never go past that bit of code. And what we want to do is, where we enable the damage collider, we can essentially initialize the list as a new list. Or we could do this when we actually make the variable. Maybe you might do it when we make the variable. Both should have the same effect. And when we close it, this one's important. Make sure you clear the list. So that way, every time you close the damage collider is refreshed. And when you open it again for, say, a combo, you're not going to have the same characters. And if you want to, you can say if characters damage or this calculation not count is greater than 0. If you want to be a stickler and you only want to run the code, if we've actually hit something, that's okay too. Now, I'm actually going to move this from here to here. So I'm just going to initialize it up here. That's how I did it in Nephilim. And I'm going to save that. Now this should be fine. If I go into the game here now and I strike this guy 1, 2, yes, okay. And he does a normal amount of damage, and now we have limb-based damage. So now your projectiles and arrows will be more accurate. And now when we fire an arrow, it should actually stick into the limb that it has penetrated. Versus before, it would just kind of float in the air because it hit on the collider that was just outside of our character. But I just want to break up the AI for one video to cover this because this just looks really nice too. It is a nice polish element. But now we're going to circle back to the advanced AI and do a bit more polishing on the archer and the knight. Maybe add some backstabbing capabilities as well. So I will see you guys in the next one. Oh, and be sure to drop a like, leave a comment if you have made it this far. It genuinely helps out my series so much. And a special thank you to my Patrons. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you next time.